The final out of that game had barely been recorded when the Los Angeles Dodgers front office made a move that nobody inside that organization was expecting to receive in the immediate aftermath of a game. The GM made a ruthless decision regarding Roki Sasaki. Ruthless is the right word. Not calculated. Not strategic. Not measured. Ruthless. Because whatever patience had existed inside the Dodgers organization for the situation surrounding Sasaki reached its absolute limit in the moments after that final out, and the response was immediate, and it was severe, and it was the kind of decision that changes the trajectory of a franchise in ways that won't be fully understood for months. 3 key players were simultaneously traded to the Detroit Tigers in a deal that restructured this roster in a fundamental way overnight. A new starting pitcher has arrived, and he is not here to watch from the bullpen. He is taking the mound against the Arizona Diamondbacks, and the expectations attached to his first appearance in a Dodgers uniform are enormous. And then Shohei Ohtani himself dropped a statement that has caused a stir throughout this entire organization. He wants to participate in the All-Star Game. 5 words that seem simple on the surface but carry enormous implications for a man who is pitching at an historic level, while carrying the most physically demanding dual role in professional baseball, and whose health and availability for the second half of this season is the single most important competitive question facing the entire Dodgers organization right now. What was your immediate reaction when you heard that the GM had made a ruthless decision regarding Sasaki in the immediate aftermath of the game, and simultaneously traded 3 key players to the Tigers? The word ruthless is doing a lot of work in how this decision is being described publicly, and it is doing that work for a very specific reason. A ruthless organizational decision is not the same as a smart organizational decision, or a necessary organizational decision, or even a decisive organizational decision. Ruthless implies that the normal considerations of timing and sensitivity and player welfare that typically govern how these moves are communicated and executed were set aside in favor of speed and impact. Making this decision immediately after the game rather than waiting until the morning or until the end of the series suggests that the GM had been building toward this conclusion for some time, and that the game itself provided the final confirmation that waiting any longer was no longer an option. Let's examine what the 3-player trade to the Tigers actually tells us about how the Dodgers front office is assessing this roster at this specific moment of the season. Because trading 3 players simultaneously is not a minor roster adjustment. It is a major restructuring that reflects a very specific judgment about the balance between what those 3 players were contributing to this team, and what the organization needed to bring in to fill the gap that Sasaki's situation has created in the rotation. The Tigers were the destination, and that choice is not random. Detroit has been operating as a seller at various points this season, and the pieces they were willing to move in exchange for 3 Dodgers players tells you that the GM identified a specific need and found the specific match for that need within the Tigers organization without compromising more of the Dodgers' long-term assets than the return justified. From a player's perspective, what does it feel like inside that clubhouse when 3 teammates are traded to another organization in the immediate aftermath of a game with what appears to be very little transition time or preparation? This is the human dimension of roster transactions that the business of baseball tends to obscure behind the language of trades and acquisitions and organizational needs. 3 players who were in that locker room during the game are now Detroit Tigers. Their lockers will be cleared. Their names will be removed from the roster. And the teammates who shared that clubhouse with them for months of this season will process the emotional reality of those absences while simultaneously being asked to compete at the highest level of professional baseball the very next day. The speed of this transaction is what makes it most difficult for the players involved and most revealing about the urgency the GM attached to making this change happen immediately rather than at a more measured pace. Now let's talk about the new starting pitcher, and what his arrival and his assignment to start against the Diamondbacks tells us about the Dodgers' immediate competitive priorities. When a newly acquired pitcher is assigned to start against a divisional rival in his very first appearance in a new uniform, it means the organization has complete confidence in his readiness to contribute immediately. There is no adjustment period being built in. There is no transition start against a less intimidating opponent to help him find his footing in a new environment with a new catching staff and new signals and new organizational preparation standards. He is going straight into one of the most competitive and most scrutinized environments in the National League against the Diamondbacks team that has been one of the Dodgers' most challenging divisional opponents this season. The confidence embedded in that assignment is a statement about what this front office believes this pitcher is capable of delivering under pressure. What specifically does this new pitcher bring to a Dodgers rotation that has been operating under significant stress given everything that has been happening around Sasaki? The rotation around Ohtani has been one of the most discussed and most debated topics surrounding this team all season. When your best pitcher is also your best hitter and is operating on a modified schedule that reflects the physical demands of his unprecedented dual role, the quality of the pitchers surrounding him in the rotation becomes critically important. Every start that another pitcher in this rotation fails to execute properly places additional burden on the bullpen and on the competitive depth of the organization. The new pitcher arriving from Detroit is being asked to stabilize something that has been genuinely unstable, and his performance in his first start against the Diamondbacks will be the first real evidence of whether the GM made the right call in pursuing this specific acquisition at this specific cost. And now we arrive at the statement from Ohtani that has caused a stir throughout the entire Dodgers organization. He wants to participate in the All-Star game. The stir that this statement has generated is not about whether Ohtani deserves to be in the All-Star game. He obviously does. The stir is about something far more complicated and far more consequential. It is about what All-Star participation means for a player whose physical health and competitive availability for the second half of the season is the most important question facing this franchise. The All-Star break is one of the most valuable rest opportunities in the entire baseball calendar. For players carrying heavy workloads, the ability to step away from competition for several days and allow the body to recover has measurable impact on how those players perform in the second half. For Ohtani specifically, the question of rest versus competition at the All-Star game is not a trivial scheduling preference. It is a decision with genuine implications for whether he can maintain his historic performance levels through October. From a medical and athletic performance perspective, how should the Dodgers organization be thinking about Ohtani's desire to participate in the All-Star game given everything we know about the physical demands of his two-way role this season? This is where the organizational stir becomes genuinely meaningful. Because Ohtani is not just a player expressing a preference for how he wants to spend his time during the break. He is the franchise player whose health and availability is the foundation on which the entire Dodgers championship structure rests. When he says he wants to participate in the All-Star game, he is expressing something genuine, and something competitive, and something entirely consistent with who he is as a person. He wants to compete. He always wants to compete. But the people around him have a responsibility that goes beyond respecting his competitive instincts. They have a responsibility to ensure that the decisions made about his schedule and his workload give this team the best possible chance to win a championship in October. Navigating that tension between what Ohtani wants and what the organization believes he needs is the stir at the center of everything. The GM made his ruthless decision. 3 players went to Detroit. A new pitcher is ready to take the mound against the Diamondbacks. And Ohtani has made his All-Star desires known to the entire organization. Every one of these developments is a chapter in the same larger story about a franchise operating at maximum intensity in pursuit of a championship that its best player and its organizational identity demand. The next several weeks will reveal whether the GM's ruthlessness, the new pitcher's readiness, and Ohtani's competitive desire all combine to produce the second-half performance that this team is capable of at its absolute best.